Scott, thank you for joining us today. You know, midterm elections are just right around the corner. They're coming up really quickly, and we have a couple races that we really want to talk about. You know, we got the governor's race. Will Nikki Haley, you know, win her second term? And we also have the U.S. Senate's, the U.S. Senators are up for re-election. You know, puts us in a very unique position. Both of them are up for election.
Right, which is, you know, it's uncommon to have two elected at the same time. So we get marquee races across the board. And it's a lot of fun and made it life tough for the Democrats to come up with good candidates for both.
Yeah, that's true. But before we get into the results right now, let's talk about the Winthrop Poll in general. Let's talk about how do you guys get these numbers, how, who you're surveying and so on. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, the Winthrop Poll initiative is aimed primarily at getting in touch with South Carolinians, the whole population, and finding out what's important, what policies they're concerned with, what issues are at stake, you know, their needs. We love doing questions, for example, on food insecurity, poverty, health issues. But whenever there's an election, of course, we throw in a likely voter poll. I mean, I am a political scientist after all, so I love my state. I love delving into the issues that matter to South Carolinians, but you just can't resist a good horse race, and this is. So general population poll, we're gonna do cell phones and landlines, which we can only do because we have live callers. Robopolls can't call cell phones. But when you do a likely voter poll, you also add in what's called registration-based sample. And that's getting phone numbers of people who are registered to vote, both landlines and cell phones, combining it with regular landline and cell phone sample. But then you have to screen them for if they're registered to vote, and then screen for likelihood of voting. And once you've done that, you've narrowed it down to people who are likely to actually turn out and vote, and you know they're registered, and you can get a good look at the people who you know are going to be choosing the next elected official.
Wow, that seems like a long process to go through just to get these polls, but these are important. These numbers are important. So let's get started with the governor's race. You know, this is one that everybody has on their mind right now. And the question that the poll asks is, if the election for South Carolina governor were held today, who would you vote for?
Right, and let me point out about, you know, we list all the candidates, of course, and we list them exactly how they're going to appear on the ballot. But importantly, even though if you go on the website and you go on ETV's website, you look on the screen now, you're going to see them listed in, well, that's the order in which the vote they got. Mm-hmm. You'll see them on our website in alphabetical order, but that's not how we said them to the caller. We randomized the names so that there was no one name that was always heard first, no one name that was always heard last. So that ensures that you're going to get a real look. You also have to make sure you describe them exactly as they're going to appear on the ballot. So if somebody is a petition candidate like Tom Irvin, you describe them as a petition candidate. There's the Libertarian candidate, there's a Citizens United candidate. We went through that. It is a matchup primarily between Shaheen and Haley, a rematch of the last election. At this point, about a month out from the election in 2010, Haley had close to a 10-point edge on Shaheen, and that's exactly what she has this time. Now in 2010, Shaheen was able to make a lot of that up. A lot of that probably came from the undecided voters who weren't sure about Haley. Haley was brand new on the scene. She'd just gone through a very bruising primary. A lot of those folks are independents, maybe even some moderate Republicans were unsure, and they fell over towards Shaheen. Shaheen was able to take back half of that deficit. This time, that 10-point deficit is going to be a little harder to make up. The folks who either like Haley or dislike Haley, they're set. There are very few people who don't have an opinion at this point if they're likely to vote. The undecideds are out there at still not quite 13%, but this election is fundamentally different because right now Haley just needs to keep her voters with her, not lose any. That's not the path to victory for Vincent Shaheen.
And you're looking at a 12% for undecided. That could change. How would that change if it went towards Vincent Shaheen or even Tom Irvin?
Well, the undecided voters, that's the question. Are they all going to go for one candidate, or are they going to be distributed? If they're evenly distributed, and some goes to Haley, then no one's going to be able to make up that deficit. Tom Irvin, if he picks up more than Shaheen, then Shaheen's not going to be able to make up that deficit. Shaheen really needs all of the undecided voters. Haley has to hope that Irvin, who calls himself an independent Republican, but he'll be listed as petition on the ballot. She has to hope that he's not bleeding more candidates from her than he's bleeding from Shaheen, and he's pulling a little from both, a little more from Haley. So that's going to be tough, and he's got to bring in brand new voters into the electorate. You know, if all the folks who voted for Obama suddenly showed up and voted for him, he could take this. But there are Obama voters who voted for Obama in 2008, voted for Obama in 2012, but did not turn out in 2010. Vincent Shaheen has got to get these voters who generally don't turn out in midterm elections and get them to turn out for this election. She just has to hold fast. He has to build the electorate. That's a much steeper uphill battle. Not impossible, of course. There's still a month to go. Uphill battle.
You know, we're talking about all these candidates, and they're all over the place right now. But let's move on to the next election. We're talking about the U.S. senators. Again, we're in an interesting position. Both of them are Tim Scott. We're going to talk about him first. You know, he's appointed by Governor Haley. His numbers are coming up as 52.4%.
That is, you know, given the fact that I think you have, you know, 13% undecided, to have over 50% of the likely voters when still 14% are undecided, that's incredibly strong. He's over his Democratic opponent by, you know, 20 points. The American Party candidate who has, you know, definitely made things interesting. But third parties, you know, the folks in third parties like to say, oh, we're biased against the two parties, keep us down. Well, the two parties certainly aren't going to encourage them. But it's structural. There's what's called Duverger's law. It's just because of our system, when you have single member districts and plurality voting, you could put that system on a, you know, an uncharted island and it would devolve into a two-party system. So most folks are going to go to the two parties. Tim Scott, 20-point advantage, already over 50% with still 14% undecided. Incredibly strong for his first election to his Senate seat.
But the other person that is up for Senate, you know, Lindsey Graham, again, the incumbent here, he's at 46.3. It's not that 50%, that's Tim Scott.
Right, it's not over 50%, but remember, that 50% is just a marker for how strong Tim Scott's doing. You don't need 50% to win an election, you just need more than the other folks. So, you know, it's easy to win an election, especially when you have multiple candidates like this one does. It's easy to win an election with less than 50%. So Lindsey Graham is in a strong position. You know, the 46% is pretty solid. He's almost, not quite 20% ahead of his Democratic opponent. Hutto, if Shaheen can get those voters into the electorate, then he's going to be able to take advantage of it against Lindsey Graham. He's going to be able to draw on those as well. Of course, you know, the wild card, or the joker card is, in this one, is Thomas Ravenel. He makes it very interesting. He's going to be listed as a petition candidate, but he's got the name recognition. Just from all of his escapades, as well as being a former statewide elected official. So it's a little different than the petition candidate in Tom Irvin, but he's getting 8% of the vote, and as long as the Democrats not getting that 8% and Lindsey Graham is still that close to 50, and he's still, you know, at 46%, almost 20 points ahead, that it would be incredibly difficult to come back. He's in a position of strength as well.
Are any of these Republicans have anything to worry about when these elections come up?
Well, if you are, you know, if you're not in that super strong position above 50%, don't stop looking in your rearview mirror. Don't do anything to anger your base. Keep them with you. You don't want to lose them. Keep an eye out for any surprises that might come along, but they are in the driver's seat. It's going to be up to the Democrats to veer them off the course. If they hold true, if nothing else changes, then they're relatively, but not absolutely safe. But, you know, we've still got a month to go.
It's a long time, you know, anything can change in that time frame.
Yeah, something can change in the matter of weeks with scandal and how news spreads these days. And when you've got several weeks, you know, you don't get too comfortable.
Exactly. So now let's move on to national politics. You know, we're a red state without a doubt. Definitely a red state. And it's showing in our view of presidential approval numbers. One of the questions the Winthrop Poll asked was, do you approve or disapprove of the way Barack Obama is handling his job as President of the United States?
Right, that's the standard approval question. You know, we throw it into every poll, whether it's a general election poll, likely voter poll, registered voter. And it's sort of a way to kind of measure South Carolina's attitudes against the rest of the country. And you're right, we are a red state. We're a Republican dominant state. It's not like the one-party dominance of the Democratic Party and eras gone by here in the South, but we are Republican dominant, and this shows in questions like this, here is our electorate, our likely voters. and approval ratings are, in the 30s, several points below approval ratings for Barack Obama in national polls. So, Obama is not wildly popular in the entire country, and he's even a little less popular down here in the South.
The disapproval rate, it's looking at 56%.
Right.
That's pretty high.
That's not just low approval. You're right. It's underwater. And when your disapprovals are that much higher than your approval rating, let's just say that Vincent Jean probably doesn't want to ask Barack Obama to come campaign for him. It's just not going to help.
Well, the congressional numbers are a lot better. They're about 81%.
Right.
The question that was asked was, do you approve or disapprove of the way Congress is handling its job? And 81% disapprove.
Disapprove. We are about even with the nation as far as congressional approval. But here's the fascinating thing. Congress is the most hated institution that is filled with the most beloved people. We don't have enough of a sample for each congressional district, but I can guarantee you that what is true nationwide is mostly true here. People tend to love their member of Congress and hate the institution of Congress. There's this bifurcated view of Congress where it's, my gosh, that's a terrible institution, it's dysfunctional. Thank God we've got my guy there protecting my interests. So, our members of Congress are generally, in the House, are generally very safe. Some often don't even see folks come against them. Some are in very strong positions against their Democratic opponents, or one Republican or one Democrat incumbent. They don't have a whole lot to worry about, but it's always fascinating to think, wow, here are congressmen in very strong positions, often thanks to redistricting, who all work in this institution that is clearly so loathed in the state.
Perfect. Well, we're out of time right now, but thank you for joining us and sharing your insights here on the Winthrop Poll, and we'll hope to talk to you further along the way when elections are coming up.
Thank you. Always glad to be with ETV.